that we're holding. Sanhedrin, I felt was a fascinating. I really enjoyed learning it. Still have not decided what we're going to be learning next week. We have to figure it out. If anyone again has suggestions, I was thinking maybe Megillah, the laws of Purim, or Sukkos, or I don't know, maybe Avodah Zarah.
Let us know so that I can, if I don't have the
Tractate.
Talmud, I need to acquire it.
Oh, okay. So I'm gonna decide by tomorrow. I'll make the final decision.
Excellent.
Okay. So let's go. So we're gonna go drop back. I'm not gonna do the Rashis. We're holding the story, the laws of rebuilding Jericho. I just learned in the Gemara, in the Mishnah's Talmud, I think it's the fifth Perek, maybe fourth Perek, I forget. That I learn Mishnahs every day. So the last Mishnah, I think of the fourth or third or fifth Perek, I forget where I'm holding. I have it marked. It says it wants to talk about the building of the things that happened in the temple. Evidently, the temple was such an awesome building that even opening and closing the doors in the morning made such a noise, or such a noise, made so much that they said you were able to hear it all the way in Jericho. And they list a whole bunch of things that happened in the temple as the day went on, different happenings in the temple throughout the day. And it says, and you heard it all the way in Jericho. Now, anyone who's in Jericho today, I mean, Jericho is not far. It's 30 kilometers down the hill, so the sound has to go from the top of the mountain down. And to say that you heard the closing of the doors all the way down in Jericho, okay, it's the opening of doors. It could be in the morning and all that, so it's quieter. And obviously, there was no drilling in those days like today, where there's so much outside noise. Maybe that was the thing. There's so much outside noise today that we don't hear things. Maybe then sound traveled much better. But either way, the Mishnah says like this. The Brisa quotes that Lo Yiricha Hashem Ir Acheres V'Lo Ir Acheres Hashem Yiricha. You're not allowed to build. Again, we're just going to go over Jericho on the name, with giving it another name. You can't just build the same city of Jericho that was destroyed by God in the days of Joshua. Miraculously, the walls collapsed and everything was destroyed. You weren't allowed to take anything from the Cherem, like we learned. This is why we're talking about it now, because similar to Ir Nidachas, it says that the trees of a city of idol worship that are connected don't have to be uprooted and they could remain. But in Jericho, they had to uproot even all the trees. That's how much destroyed the city has to be. And the commandment was that it has to remain destroyed. So you're not allowed to rebuild it and give it a new name. And you shouldn't build another city and name it Jericho, like anywhere in Eretz Yisrael. Hey, Joshua. How do we know? How do you know you're not allowed to rebuild Jericho or another city that was in the name of Jericho? So this is the assumption of the Gemara, is that the city that Chiel built was a city not in the place where the biblical Jericho was. Also because the North Kingdom didn't go that south. So it says Bana Chiel Beisa Eli Es Yericha. He built Jericho, but Avira Mechairai, bearing his elder son Aviram, on page 113a, bearing Aviram his elder son, Yisada, he put down the foundations, Ubis Guv Tziroi, and Biskuv, his youngest son, Titziv de Laseha, he completed, so to say, the building of Jericho with the putting up the doors. So his sons were killed, died, so to say, because he rebuilt Jericho, and Joshua cursed anyone who's going to rebuild Jericho. We did the Rashis, so we're not going to read the Rashis. We did it last week. Tanya, we learned that Ba'aviram b'chayrei Rasha, Aviram was his son, his elder son was wicked. So he didn't have to know that what he was doing was wrong, because it could be his older son died because he was wicked, meaning he died for his own sins. Hey, Ariel. But on his younger son, we're just going back a drop. On his younger son, Biskuv, by then already he should have realized that the reason why he's punished and he's losing his children, meaning he's burying his children, is because he was rebuilding another city, naming it Jericho. So the Gemara says, hold on. What did this guy Chiel, again, this we're talking about in the days of the first temple, after the split of the two kingdoms, means the North Kingdom and the South Kingdom, the kingdom of Yehuda, of the house of David, was in the south, Today, Jericho is part of the kingdom, and it was then also. That's why we assume that one of the Yad Ramah, or the Rav Marsha says, that's why he built a city in the north and called it Jericho. The kings of the north were Yeravim, and here we're talking about the days of Achav. Achav is one of the most powerful kings in the early days of the kingdom of the north, and he was we learned about him, he's one of the most corrupt kings, idol worshiper. His wife Isabel is horrible. They bring in the Baal. He's one of the people listed that do not have a portion in the world to come. Who is the prophet of the northern kingdom of his days? In the beginning was Elijah the prophet. Elijah passes away in the lifetime of Achav, and then it's at the end it's Elisha. That Elisha becomes the prophet of the north, so to say, and then lives into the other descendants of Achav and other kings. Now, this person Chel is a friend of Achav, and he builds a city seemingly in the north, somewhere in the northern kingdom, calling it Yerichai, and his sons are buried. He buries his sons, meaning his children die while he's building Yerichai, because Joshua cursed anyone who's going to rebuild the city and calling it Jericho. Okay, but now the Gemara says, so the Gemara said that when his first son died, when he started to lay the foundations, maybe then he could have thought that it was his first son's sins, so therefore it had nothing to do with Jericho. So the Gemara says, but what did Aviram do? He says that Aviram and Skuv were wicked. My Avid, what did they do that they were called wicked? Again, we don't really know who these people are to know, but the Gemara is asking, what did they do? My comments, it said, this is what it means. By the time the Aviram wasn't wicked and Skuv weren't wicked, his children didn't do anything wrong. But by the time he buried his second son, he should have realized that this is what he's doing is wrong by rebuilding Jericho. So the Gemara says, but why does the pasuk have to tell us that Aviram was the firstborn by telling us that Aviram was the firstborn or the oldest? Don't we know that Seguv, who's not the firstborn, is younger than him? So why does the Torah have to tell us that Seguv was younger? We know he's younger. There's only one firstborn. So the Gemara answers, Skuv tziroi melamed sheimekaber v'hoylech me'avir matzkuv, that he had many children or other children. And his children kept on dying throughout his building of Jericho. By the time he put up the doors of Jericho, which the doors are the completion of the building of Jericho, he buried his last son. Okay, so here we see that Joshua's curse happened to the person who tried to build Jericho again in another city, naming it Jericho. Okay, again, we learned the Rashi, so we're going to continue. Now the Gemara tells us the story. And this is how we're going to finish off the Tractate of Sanhedrin about Elijah the prophet, which is a good thing, because this is the Perek of Chelek, which talks about the world to come, and we know one of the personalities that are going to be announcing the coming of Mashiach is Elijah the prophet. We have the prophet of Malachi, Eliyahu Navi is going to come Lifnei Yom Ba. We know that Elijah the prophet comes one day before the coming of Mashiach. So the halacha goes into all the complications of when that day is. He can't come on a Friday, he can't come on a Sunday. All these complications of when Elijah is going to pencil in his schedule because of certain restrictions to come and announce the coming of Mashiach. But okay. The Gemara says, Achav Shoshvinei Have. Achav, the king Achav, again, the king of the north, he was a good buddy with this fellow Chel, who built Jericho, who lost his children during the building of the city. Aseihu ve'Eliyahu, him and Elijah the prophet together, or they met together, it doesn't say they came together. Lemishal b'shloima beitaima. They came to see Chel, seemingly visiting him in a shiva house, or when he was mourning. Beit Hama, we'll see what that means. Beit Hama means, but it means basically they're trying to figure out, according to most, to figure out what was the reason, like what happened to his children. Why was he losing all his children? So he says, Yosef Amar. So Chel sat down, and he started to wonder about himself, what he did building Jericho. Dilma ki meilat Yeshua hachilat. Maybe this is what Yeshua meant when he cursed, that not only can't you build the city of Jericho, you can't even build another city and name it Jericho. That Joshua cursed anyone who's going to build Jericho and try to name it another name, or to rebuild another city and call it Jericho. And we learned this last week, but we're just chazring. Elijah said, yes, that's what happened, and that's why you buried your children. So now Achav, King Achav again, King Achav is the wicked king. He's the one who, idol worshiper, he's a big scholar. He knows how to learn very well. But he's an open heretic who doesn't serve God, and he serves the idols of Baal and his wife, and he kills all the prophets. So Amrlei, so Achav says, is that so? You want to say that that's why Chil lost his children because he built Jericho and the curse of Joshua happened? Hashta levata de Moshe like the curse of Moshe, his teacher, doesn't happen. Why? What it means the curse of Moshe doesn't happen. Because Moshe says in the Torah, Vesartem vavadatam, that if you're going to leave the path and serve idols, V'chara af Hashem b'chem, God's going to become angry with you if you serve idols, V'atzer es hashamayim, and he's going to close up the heavens, meaning it won't rain. And he says about himself, boastfully or matter-of-factly, he says, Vahu Gavra, and this person, referring to himself, Achav, Oikim le'avodah zarah, kol telem v'telem, I placed idols on every single hilltop of the north. V'leishavik le'mitra de'mezal miskad le'levata d'yeshu talmidei mikaima, and I couldn't even walk. He says the rain was so strong in the north that I couldn't even walk up to the paths of the idols because it was all muddy. So God said, if you put up idols, we're going to close this. It won't rain. Not only is it raining, it's pouring. So you want to tell me that where's Moshe's curse? So if Moshe's curse doesn't happen, you want to tell me Joshua's curse happens? This is where we finished off last week. So let's see the Rashi. Rashi says, Achav sheshvin oyav shechil haya Achav. Who was the good buddy? The friend of Chayil was Achav, the king. Beit Taima, they went to Beit Taima. What does that mean? One opinion is that they went to the mourner's house when he buried his last son, King Achav, and who's his friend, and Elijah show up at Chayil's house. Why is it called Beit Taima? Because we say things to the person, so the person should be consoled. Okay, sometimes it says it without an ayin. It means to say that it's a house of a mourner. Okay, so we're talking about they go to the house of the mourner, and he says in his mourning he talks. He says, maybe this is why my children died. So Achav says, what are you talking about? I put up idols on kol telem v'telem, every hilltop. Shayra varugo makim gevayu. What is the telem means? A little bit of a elevation. That there's so much rain that it doesn't stop raining. That it was so muddy from the rain that comes, that Moshe says that it's not going to rain. It's so pouring. I can't even go to the idol worship, to the house, to the idols, because it's too muddy. Because the roads are full of mud. Okay, let's see what Rabbi Steinsaltz says here. Rabbi Steinsaltz says the incident explains the order of the verses in Kings, chapter 17. The prophet, okay, this is going ahead. The prophet relates the incident involving Chil in between the account of the wickedness of Achav and that of Elijah's oath that there will be neither dew or rain. So we're going to see in a second that the reason why this story of rebuilding Jericho and Achav meeting Elijah, and the Gemara explaining that Elijah that Achav was telling Elijah that Moshe his children died for whatever reason, but not because Joshua was cursed, had nothing to do with it. So we're going to see in a second that Elijah took offense to that statement and he punishes Achav. But let's see that in a second. From the Gemara, it's clear that Chil did not rebuild Jericho. Rather, he built another city and named it Jericho. In the Jerusalem Talmud, this assumption is based on the fact that Chil was not a member of the tribe of Benjamin. Therefore, and that's where in Binyamin is where the city of Jericho is. Therefore, he would not have built the city of Jericho, which is located in the lands belonging to that tribe, meaning Benjamin. Furthermore, Jericho was ruled by the kingdom of Yehuda, and Chil was subject of the kingdom of Israel. It is unlikely that he would build a city in a rival kingdom. What's Beis Tameh? So Beit Tameh. Rav Steinsaltz says the Gaon and most early commentaries cite the variant reading Beit Ta'ama and explain that the custom was that the attendant, meaning in the house of a mourner, there was an attendant, would turn to those assembled and proclaim, "Let the sages inquire as to the reason, Tom, that the residents of this house are garbed as mourners." It means basically the attendant of the house would tell the people visiting, ask what happened, which you're supposed to open up. The person's not supposed to start talking. The mourner doesn't start talking. The guests start talking. The people would answer, "Blessed is the true judge." They'd say, "Baruch Thy Nemes," announcing obligatory that it was a house of mourning. This exchange would be repeated with each successive group of visitors. That is why he was called Beit Ham. In this context, the meaning is that Achav and Elijah went to visit Chil to inquire why this calumny of deaths of all his sons had befallen him. And Achav doesn't want to accept Elijah's version, which is that he went against the curse of Joshua. So what did Elijah do when Achav said that? We know, we're going to learn, the Rebbe quote, we're going to talk a little bit in the Siyum, but the Rebbe quotes the story. Miyad vayomer Eliyahu HaTishbi, immediately Eliyahu the Tishbi said, Mitoshavei Gilad, he's from the people who lived in Gilad, Chai Hashem, which is an expression of a shvua, of a promise. Elikei Yisrael im yiyeh talam mater. He says, yeah, that's what you say? You're saying that you're calling out Moshe Rabbeinu, saying that Moshe promised, cursed anyone who serves idols, it won't rain? It won't rain. Elijah says, I'm telling you now, it's not raining. I make a promise to you. You're not going to have rain. He davened to God, he prayed, and God gave him the key to rain, and he left. The story goes, it didn't rain for 3 years. The whole Israel dried up because Achav was mocking Moshe, and Elijah took offense on this. We know that Elijah was a Kanoi. We know Elijah and Pinchas are the same person, just like Pinchas stood up for Pinchas, Moshe's nephew. In the Midbar, they're the same person, Pinchas and Eliyahu. So just like Pinchas was a Kanoi, a zealot for Moshe Rabbeinu and God in the story in Bamidbar, when the tribe of Shimon went with the daughters of Midian, Elijah was a zealot for God, and he took offense, and for Moshe. He took offense of Achav mocking God and Moshe. He says that's the case. He asked God to give him the key of rain, not literally the key of rain, but the concept of the permission for it to rain. And it didn't rain for 3 years, and we're going to learn in a second what happened. Miyad v'yom Rashi says, Miyad v'yom Eliyahu Chai Hashem im yiyeh hashanim eila mater. I promise you there will not be rain. Why does that story happen right next to the verse of chapter 17 of Kings that talks about this meeting of Elijah the prophet, Achav and Chel, who built Jericho and lost his sons? Because the reason it stopped raining was because of that conversation that the Gemara tells us that Achav mocked Moshe Rabbeinu. Is aklida de matra. He asked for the mafteach shel mater, the key of rain. So it says, "Vayhi dvar Shem elav lemar." What happened afterwards? God gave him the key of rain. We're going to learn that there's 3 things. There's many sources of blessing, right? There's 3 keys that God doesn't give to anyone: the key of rain, the key of life, and the key of birth, of having children. That's God holds those keys. The Elijah asked for one of the keys. Now it means to say, what does it mean asking for the key? That even, so to say, lahavdil, God can't make it rain. Even if God has compassion, God has compassion on the kingdom of Israel, he's not going to rain because Elijah's holding the key of rain. But they needed rain. So God made a story that Elijah is going to have to give the key back. It says, Vahidvar Shem elav lemer. So God spoke to Elijah and told him, Lech mizeh, go from here. Upanisa lacha kedma, go east. V'nistarta benachal, and hide, because Achav wanted to kill him. Right? Achav was the king, and he went and he cursed Israel, and there was no rain. So he went and he hid. Later Achav calls Eliyahu the destroyer of Israel. He blames that on Elijah. He doesn't remember that he instigated it by bragging of his idol worship. But he hides in the Nachal Kris, and this is the famous story of Oivrim Mevim Lelechem Ubatzar Babayker. And so he hid in a cave. It's the famous story that the ravens brought Elijah food, bread and meat, and he lived off the ravens. That's why it's brought down. And we just finished Noach, the Parsha Noach, that when Noach sent the raven out to check if the land had dried, the raven just went around the boat and came back, didn't go do his job. One of the reasons it's brought down is because the raven had another job. Then in the time of Elijah, the raven was the one that God chose to deliver food, right? Today we talk about drones delivering. So those days, before 3,000 years ago, before drones were delivering, the ravens were delivering. So he had his Walt, he had his Uber Eats. What was the Uber Eats? Who was delivering the Uber Eats? The ravens. So the ravens was bringing the bread and meat on a daily basis to Elijah's hidden cave next to the river of Greece, next to the brook of Greece. But the question is, where did the ravens pick it up from? Who was the restaurant? Who was the kitchen? Someone had to make the meat. So Rav Yehuda said, Rav Yehuda says the name Rav, Mi beit habachi da'achav. The ravens would fly in to the kitchen of Achav himself, pick up the food, and deliver it to Elijah the prophet. It's brought down to two things. Number one is, how did he eat from Achav? We just said Achav is a person who puts up idols on every hilltop. He didn't have how would he eat his food? It wasn't kosher. So number one is that Achav kept a strictly kosher kitchen. Achav had a lot of interesting things. He knew how to learn. He was a big Talmud Chacham, served idols obsessively. Like he says, if you lived in my times, you would lift up your garments to run to the idol worship. And he kept a strictly kosher kitchen. So therefore, the ravens, it says, who was the mashgiach in Achav's kitchen? Avadia, the prophet. We learn about Avadia in the story that Avadia was kind of close to the king. Another prophet, he was the Adomi. He comes from the converts of Esav. That's what we read about him soon in the Haftorah of Vayishlach. So Avadia was the mashgiach and the shochet. And therefore Elijah knew that it was good meat. He could eat. He could trust the raven's delivery. So he ate from Achav's kitchen. So it says, "Vayi mikes yamim." After a little bit of time, God caused that the brook dry out, so he had no water. Why was there no water? Because Elijah's holding on to the key. There's no rain. Eventually, the waters dry up. So God sees the world's in pain. Everyone's dying for rain, literally. So God figured, okay, he has to get Elijah to give the key back. So God says again to Elijah, Kum lech Tzarfata. Go to Tzarfata, not Tzarfata, France, but it's further east. It says, Kivin the Chazak HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Rashi says, the Ika Tzarbam, when God sees that there's pain in the world, meaning people are suffering from the famine. So God tells Eliyahu, Lech Tzarfata, go to the Tzarfata. Why does God tell him to go to Tzarfata? The Galgal Hadavar, to make things, the ball rolling. We're going to learn, God wanted Elijah to give back the key. Otherwise, it couldn't rain. So he had to make that Elijah to have to give back the key, and we're going to see how he did it. The Mashal explains why this statement is cited here. It teaches that since the ravens brought him food from Achav's palace, slaughterhouse, Elijah was incognized of that suffering caused by the famine to the general population. Meaning Elijah the prophet wasn't suffering. He was getting food from the king's kitchen. As far as he was concerned, everything's okay. There was food available in the king's palace long after it was not available to other people. If the ravens were picking up food from someone else's kitchen, he wouldn't have anything to eat. But they were going to the king's kitchen, so he wasn't suffering. So then it says, it says like this. After God tells him he has to go east, so God tells him, he sends him to this woman. It's brought down. He sends him to this woman that God says, don't worry, that you're going to go to this place, and the woman there is going to feed you. So I bring down the story in a second. It says, hold on, give me a second. There was an Amona, she was a widow. So God said, don't worry, she's going to feed you. So what happened was, after he goes down there and this woman's feeding him, she had nothing to eat. If you remember correctly, the story, there had to be a miracle for her to have enough bread to give Elijah. So that itself was a miracle that she was able to feed him. She was resentful a bit. She was doing it, but she was a bit resentful. And it says, the son of this woman now gets sick. So she's feeding him. She's not really happy about it. Elijah makes a promise. There's a miracle for her to have enough food for both of them. And so and it says that she says to Elijah, "Ma li v'loch ish elikim b'asei lai lahaskir oinu lahamas esbanei." She says basically, she talks out loud to Elijah. She says to Elijah, "What did I need this? I don't need the man of God to come. First of all, he reminds me how poor I am, because he sends only he has to make, she has not enough food to feed them both, and and now my son got sick. So so now the son is getting sick and the son is dying, and he asked God for the key of life so he could resurrect this child. So God tells him, there's three keys I don't give to anyone. Shlia shel chaya, for life, shel kshamim, for rain, shel tchias hamesim, to resurrect. It means life, to give birth, to reign, and to resurrect the dead. If I give you the key of resurrecting the dead, allowing you to save the woman's child, people the voices are going to say, Stein biyad Talmud v'achad biyad Rav. You have two keys and I only have one. God only has one key, and Elijah now has two keys. One is the key of resurrection. The second one is the key of rain. I say, if you want, I could give you the key of resurrection, but you have to give me back the key of rain. And that's what happened. He gives back the key of rain, and he gives back the key of rain, then God brings the rain back to the people. So three keys are not given to the messengers. There are many treasures of God, and he has many keys. He gives them to different emissaries, that are in charge of giving different blessings. Two keys, three keys God doesn't give to anyone. God does not appoint any messenger for three things. From the beginning of time, they're in God's hands, and he doesn't give any messengers these keys. And God told Elijah, these three keys I held in my own hand since the beginning. I never gave it to a messenger. On an exception of this rule, I gave you one key, the key of rain. Now you want a second key? Then the people, it's going to be said, that the key, two of these special keys of rain and resurrecting the dead is by the student, meaning Elijah, and the master, which is God, only has one. And then he had to give back the key of rain. It says, if God tells him to go to Achav, Eter Mater, that I'm going to give rain. It doesn't say V'tein Mater, you should give rain. Why? Because Elijah gave back the key, so therefore God gives the rain. Some explain this means that all three are not given to one agent at the same time. Others explain that they are not given to an agent permanently to utilize them at his discretion. Still, others explain that there is no angel appointed to utilize these keys, in contrast to the angels mentioned who control hail and fire. Okay. Darish Hahu Galila Kamed Rav Chizda. Someone from Galilee said to Rav Chizda, Mashal Daliyahu Lama Hadavar Daima. What do we see about the story about Elijah? We see about Elijah, Ligavra, the Tarke, Ligale, Va'abde Limafteche. It's like a person who slams the door who lost the key. Like saying Elijah basically took the key and as if he lost it and he wasn't letting it rain. Rashi says, the Tarki Lagale, Shisasam Shar Shalai, Va'avid Limafteche, like a person who closes the door and loses the key. He locked the door of rain. But at the end, he loses the key. Why? Because he's not the one who could open the rain. God opens the rain. So the Gemara continues. Rabbi Yoshi said, meaning it's an expression of how great Elijah the prophet is. We're turning the page to 113b, the last little part. Kaptan. He's a difficult person. The captain also means he gets offended fast, or he takes what is it called? He takes offense when someone on behalf of God. So he said, because look, Elijah the prophet was difficult. He was upset at Achav for saying what he said. He kept the key. It says, that it was custom that Elijah would come visit Rabbi Yossi every day. 3 days passed, and Elijah didn't come visit him. After 3 days, why didn't you come visit me the past 3 days? You called me difficult. So again, he's offended. Why did you call me difficult? So he says to Rabbi Yossi, this is an example that is before us, that my master is difficult. It means, look, I don't need to show that you're difficult. You're difficult. Look, I just mentioned that you're difficult and you got offended. So you're very sensitive. So you captain shekos alachav. What does it mean that he's difficult? Because he got angry at Achav and he said, he made a promise there won't be any rain. So Elijah would come visit him in his house of study. Call Yom every day. He didn't come for 3 days. This says. This is exactly what I mean, that you get sensitive. You take offense. I mentioned that you're sensitive, and you took offense that I mentioned that you're sensitive. Because you got offended at me. Basically, and this is a famous thing that you have to be very careful when you talk about Elijah the prophet. Why? Because Elijah the prophet gets offended fast. So we see here from the Gemara that he got offended fast. That he, even by calling him sensitive, he got offended. Some people get sensitive, and they get sensitive if you call them sensitive. That finishes that story. We have the last little piece of Gemara here. We're talking about taking spoils from the house, from the place of a city of idol worship. It says, "Lo yidbak biyadcha ma'uma min acherim." Don't take anything from the city that's been ostracized. The Gemara says, as long as there's wicked people in the world, God's anger is in the world. Man Rishayim, what does it mean, wicked people? Rabbi Yosef Ganavi, people who steal, meaning people who steal from the spoils of a city of idol worship, like Achan, who took from the city of Yerichai, brings God's wrath on the world. Okay. Let's just see what Rabbi Steinsaltz explains this piece. He says, the early and late commentators question this determination and its place here. The straightforward understanding is that anyone who takes from another's property is a thief, as in the case of Achan, who took from the city of Jericho, who confessed that he stole property from Jericho. Alternatively, the Gemara is referring to thieves who take the spoils of an idolatrous city and in doing so, bring the fiery wrath of God upon the world. Others explain that the reference here is to ordinary thieves whom the court excommunicates until they return the stolen items. On every day that passes in which they do not return the stolen items, they violate the provisions of that excommunication, says the Mashal. Similarly, the Maharatz Chayut explains that those who steal royal property are as reprehensible as those who violate major Torah prohibitions, and those who take property from which one may not derive benefit, because in doing so, they endanger the entire Jewish people by bringing God's wrath. So therefore, if they take from the Cherem, you bring God's wrath. So this is how the Gemara is going to finish now, the Tractate of Sanhedrin. Tana Rabbanan, our rabbis have learned. Rasha Ba'al Olam Charan Ba'al Olam. When wicked people come to the world, God's wrath, anger comes to the world. Shnemer B'vai Rasha Ba Gambuz V'im Kolen Cherpa. As it says, when the wicked comes into the world, contempt also comes in, and with ignominy reproach, which means God's anger towards the wicked. Rasha Avid Min Olam, and when a wicked person leaves the world or is destroyed from the world, Taiva Ba Olam, it's good for the world. How do we know? It says the verse that says, Rina, when there's destruction of the wicked, we are Rina happy. Tzaddik nifta min olam, when a righteous person leaves this world, ra ba olam, bad things happen to the world. Shnemer hatzadik avad ve'ein ish sam alei v'anshe chesed nesafim be'ein mevin ki mipnei hara nesav tzaddik. It says, basically, the verse says that the righteous perishes and no man lays it to heart, and merciful men are taken, non-understanding that due to the evil, the righteous is taken. So basically, the pasuk is really saying that why do righteous people die? Because of the evil in the world. It says, Sadik Ba'al, when a righteous person comes to the world, Taiv Ba'al, it brings good to the world. Shenemar, as it says, Zayin Achmenu, when Noach is born, it says Noach is going to bring us nacham, consolation, mimasenu umitzvenu yadenu, that he will take comfort us for our work and the toil of our hands. And this finishes V'silka La Mesaches Sanhedrin. Let's just do the Rashi, and then we'll just do the Hadron. And anyone who wants to share something is welcome to share something. It says Mipnei hara koidim shetavi hara hatzadik nesa. Before the bad comes to the world, the tzaddik passes away. Michlal the kivin shemeis haraba, because he died, that's why bad things happen. Al tzaddik balalim, when a righteous person comes to the world, paska hara, the bad stops. Shnemer zayin achmenu, he is going to bring us consolation, which is referring to Rabbi Noach. Just these next two pieces. Some explain that the term kolen means burning, as that is one of the meanings of the root kuf lamed hey, which is kaleh, burning. Based on this and that understanding, they explain that with advent of evil, wrath comes to the world, which is like burning wrath. The verse that this is the one who shall comfort, meaning Noach, is stated with regard to the birth of Noach, to explain why he received that name. On this basis, on the basis of that verse, the sages explain that from the moment that a righteous person enters the world, consolation accompanies him. Okay, let's just do a quick hadron. Hadron Allah, Mesaches Sanhedrin, V'Hadron Allah, Daitan Allah, Mesaches Sanhedrin, V'Daitan Allah, Lai Nisn Shei Minach, Mesaches Sanhedrin, Lai Nisn Shei Minan, Lai Ba'oma Haden, Lai Ba'oma Da'asi. He says, "Yihiratzin lefanecha Adonai Eloheinu v'lehei aveseinu shtehei teirascha u'manaseinu ba'ilam hazeu tehei imanu la'ilam haba. Chanina bar papa, Rami bar papa, Nachman bar papa, Achi bar papa, Abba Mori bar papa, Rafram bar papa, Rochish bar papa, Surcha bar papa, Adar bar papa, Drew bar papa." What we're saying now is the part that you're supposed to say every time you finish a tractate of Talmud. So it says it's like a prayer. So we're saying Harev na Hashem Adonai Eloheinu astiv v'sarascha b'finu b'fi fi'is amcha beis Yisrael v'niyu kolanu nachnu v'tzatzeinu v'tzatzeika amcha beis Yisrael kolanu yedesh mecha loim desarascha me'oivit chakmeni mitzvaysecha ki la'olam hi li yihi li bisamim b'chukecha l'man lei evash la'olam loi eshkach b'chudecha ki bam chisani baruch atah Adonai amdeni chukecha amin 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 sa'lavayv. Moide menachnu lach Adonai Eloheinu v'lei avesenu shesamta chalkenu miyesh beis hamedrash v'samta chalkenu miyesh v'kranis shanu mashkimin v'hem mashkim anu mashkim l'divrei Sarah v'hem mashkim l'divrei B'Telem anu amelim v'hem amelim anu amelim v'mekabel schar v'hem amelim v'einu mekabel schar anu reitzim v'hem ratzim anu reitzim l'chayim haba v'hem ratzim v'er shachas shnemer v'ater elihim taridem l'ver shachas an shedam v'mirma l'yachzi v'hem ani avtach bach yiratzim l'knach Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Elohai b'shem she'zartani l'sayim Mesechtes Sanhedrin kein ta'azreni l'haschil Mesechtes v'svar macherim u'lisayim limod u'lamud lishma v'latzis l'kayim eskol divi Talmud tarzecha b'yava u'schus kol tanoim v'amirayim v'samidei chacham yamad li u'zari shloi tamu shatayrim mipi zari v'zer zari ad oilam v'siskayim v'hisalachtecha tancha oisach v'shachbecha tishmar alecha v'akitzoisa hi tisichecha Kivi yirbu yemecha ve'yasifu lacha shnayis chaim aricham b'mina mismayil ha'isha v'kaved Adonai oiz la'amar yitein Adonai yivarech hasamay b'shalom. So mazel tov to everyone. We've completed the tractate.
Mazel tov.
And thank you, Shuki, and all of those who have joined. And I think it was a lovely learning. We took us through COVID. We started off in Seattle in person. When I was there, and Baruch Hashem, we carried through most of the group that stayed with us from the beginning, and we studied the tractate and went through COVID, and then after COVID, and here in Eretz Yisrael. So I think it's a nice accomplishment. It's 113 pages full, so it's something really nice. And by tomorrow, I will update what Masechta I think we should learn forward. Again, when we have a few minutes, if anyone wants to share something what they felt about the Masechta, please say something. And otherwise, again, it's something to be proud of. What we just said in the tefillah now is we're praying that it's something that we take as a Jewish person, and this is a tradition for thousands of years. That when we finish a tractate of Talmud, it's not just something that we close a book. It's really a statement about what's important to us. And the study of Torah and the toiling of Torah and how it shows the uniqueness of the Jewish people, of how we've been studying the same study for thousands of years. And this is really even before it was authored by the Talmud in 2,000 years ago. These are the studies that's came down all the way from Moshe Rabbeinu from Sinai. So it's a huge deal to continue in that legacy. And we talk a merit to continue studying Talmud and together in Arichas Yom Shem Tovos. It's customary to say L'chaim, so L'chaim, everyone. Saying L'chaim or coffee. 6:40 in the morning here. L'chaim. And that's what I have to say about this. All right.
Can I say a word?
So sure, go ahead, Z.
I just like to say that one of the things that is towards the end of Sanhedrin, it talks about Mashiach coming. So I hope that b'schut the Siyum, we should see the Gula Shlema V'Rachami Mashiach come very soon.
Amen. Amen. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. All right, everyone. Yasher Koach again. Big accomplishment and Kol Tuv, and we'll see us all at the Siyum, not just the beginning, but the Siyum of the next Masechta. I don't know. Hopefully, it doesn't take as long to finish, but this was a work in progress.
113 pages.
113 pages exactly.
So I'm at page
So
112.
thank you, Rabbi.
You're welcome.
112b base at the moment.
Oh, very good. So you're close.
No, I still have to finish it.
Very good. Very good. Well, you should finish it B'ez Hashem soon. Lala Tov, everyone. Take care.
By tomorrow at the latest.
Bezrat Hashem.